Hello, this is Justin Wilcoxon, and we'll be speaking about Venezuela, a country of oil and turmoil, a look into the oil-rich nation and its current geopolitical state in the global oil market. The beginnings of Venezuela's oil industry. Venezuela as a nation emerged after the collapse of Gran Colombia in 1830. Since its inception as a nation, it was militarily ran up until 1959. 1959 saw the beginnings of democratically ran elections. The first commercial oil well to develop out of Venezuela it was 1914 and was promptly named Zumquay 1. In 1960, Venezuela became a founding member of OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, along with other fellow members such as Saudi Arabia, Ecuador, Iran, Iraq, and Kuwait. Venezuela is one of only two countries in the Western Hemisphere that is a member of OPEC, the other obviously being Ecuador. Production on a global scale. Being an OPEC member means that they abide by a honor system in which the members of the group work to set standards of oil production and prices in order to manage market volatility. Each country has its own national oil company, or an NOC. Within its memberships, they are the sole producer, refining, and seller of petroleum. Otherwise, any other parts of this process are strictly overseen by the nation itself. Being an OPEC member being an OPEC member means it is a non-equity access nation. So any participation by a foreign country or entity within the oil and matters of oil must be approved and overseen by that nation. OPEC members, as previously stated, agree upon setting oil prices and production in order to help manage the market and reduce the likelihood of volatility. Formation of Venezuela's NOC and global market. Formed in 1976, Petróleos de Venezuela S.A. is recognized as Venezuela's only oil-producing company and orchestrates all aspects of petroleum production and exportation. Promptly titled PDVSA, it operates on the fifth largest oil reserve in the world. And early on in its creation, PDVSA actually had a great partnership with the U.S. in the exportation of or exporting of oil. As of 2004, PDVSA was the fourth largest integrated oil firm globally. Exports accounted for anywhere from 67 to 72% of its production. In terms of production, that equated to figures of anywhere between 2.1 to 2.6 million barrels a day. Estimates in 2005 of revenue from PDVSA were around $85.7 billion. Pitfalls of the Venezuelan Petrol state. Beginning in 1999 with the election of Hugo Chavez, this saw a shift in the democratic state, which had formed in 1959, to a more authoritarian-like state. This has created a level of instability socially and job market-wise for Venezuela. Annual statistics in 2020 from OPEC website estimate 99% of Venezuela's domestic export revenue was based on oil and oil-based products. This, as far as diversification, virtually limits the economic growth as well as the job market for the citizens of Venezuela. Beginning in 1997 to 2006, 40% of revenues from oil sales were diverted to the Venezuelan government. The inclusion of oil rents and taxes, this estimate goes to 60%. This is the equivalent of $200.68 billion. This has led to a major deficit in the social program spending. The Venezuelan government takes its cut in the revenues that are generated from PDVSA, and beyond the PDVSA investments, invest in social programs of citizens of Venezuela. 1970 saw the advent of the Venezuela Investment Fund by the state government, which was the first attempt formally and constructively to invest oil revenues into social progress. The FIV invested heavily in the interests of the Venezuelan people, primarily in the form of energy-intensive industries and attempts to diversify the Venezuelan industrial economy. However, FIV, formerly or known as the Venezuelan Investment Fund, fell through due to instability and volatility related to the political agendas. In the 1990s, FIEM, or the Investment Fund for Macroeconomic Stabilization, was formed as an initiative to succeed where the FIV had failed. FIEM was initially created to be utilized especially during times of low oil prices. However, under the Chavez administration, it became more discretionary and created more volatility. Due to the Chavez administration's controls and rampant corruption, FIEM became inoperable due mostly in part to new budget laws being passed and changes occurring more frequently to the fund. These budget laws effectively diverted revenue streams from oil away from the fund, even during times when oil prices were on the rise. 2005, the National Development Fund, FONDEN, was initiated in efforts to properly manage the country's savings from petroleum sales. The primary objectives of FONDEN focused heavily on education and healthcare, this being a way to leverage the economic growth and maintain development. FONDEN consists of board members, which are the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Planning and Development, and an executive vice president. They are charged with making investments at the national level and abroad from petroleum revenues. FONDEN also serves the function for private investors and joint ventures, as well as the central bank who can provide funds in times of surplus. Unfortunately, FONDEN does not operate in the sharing of resources with regional and local governments, and is used at the discretion of the president. FONDEN breakdown of expenditures shows that investing as of 2006, total spending was $9.85 billion. 3.68 of that went to the Ministry of Finance, 1.52 to the Ministry of Energy and Oil, 1.09 to the Ministry of Defense. This roughly equates or represents 63% of resources spent on items not related to social development projects. Only 6% of this, however, was dedicated to housing, 15% to infrastructure, 5% to health, and 7% to land and agriculture. In summary, at the end of 2013, President Chavez exited office but handpicked Nicolas Maduro as his successor, which has been a continuation of the established authoritarian style of government. In order for Venezuela to traverse this economic collapse that it has entered, it must turn to spending petroleum revenues into developing infrastructure, relying heavily on education and social development programs. This investment should be geared towards the social development in areas of education in order to diversify its economic resources and industrial growth. However, in order to do so, the nation of Venezuela must and has to go forward with a government willing and dedicated to the prosperity of its citizens and future.